everyone. Welcome to The Zest, the official podcast of Orange Coast Magazine. I'm Chelsea Ranieri, and today we're joined by a true cultural icon. She's the international bestselling novelist behind Sex and the City and the woman often called the real-life Carrie Bradshaw. From bestselling books like Four Blondes, Lipstick Jungle, and the Carrie Diaries to the HBO phenomenon that changed the conversation around women, friendship, dating, and ambition, her work has shaped pop culture for decades. Now she's bringing her critically acclaimed one-woman show, True Tales of Sex, Success, and Sex and the City to South Coast Repertory May 30th through 31st, taking audiences on a whirlwind journey through New York from Studio 54 to Sex and the City and beyond. Please enjoy this conversation with Candace Bushnell. I am such a huge fan of your work. I have watched Sex and the City in my teens, 20s, and 30s. And I think what I love most about it is every decade, but really every year, something resonates deeper for me. I connect with it in a different way. And I truly don't know many other shows that actually do that. So I'm a huge fan of Sex and the City.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Of course. Okay. Well, you grew up in Connecticut and your father worked on technology using the Apollo space missions. So how did your family and childhood shape your ambition?
Well, it probably shaped it a lot. And it is one of the things that I talk about in my one woman show, because my father said, oh, you have to make a major contribution like I did. So that was always in the back of my head. And my parents never said, we want you to get married and we want you to have kids. Mm-hmm. In fact, they never really said much of anything, but I somehow interpreted that to, being successful in the world, not, and it wasn't about getting married or having kids.
I love that. And then you moved to New York at just 19 years old. So what inspired that move and what do you remember feeling in that moment?
Well, again, it's all covered in the one woman show. I do totally remember it. I always wanted to live in New York and be a writer ever since I was a kid. Since I was like 8 years old, it was my dream. And I went to Rice University and I was there for, really like 2 years. I took all of the writing classes and I was like, I'm kind of done with college. So I actually ran away from college and ran to New York and had, all kinds of adventures.
Oh my gosh, that's so incredible. And then in 1983, you started writing Sex and the City, the column for the New York Observer. So what inspired this column?
No. That was in I started writing for the New York Observer in 1993. I started writing the column in 1994, but I published my first piece when I was 19 in New York City. And again, it's one of the things that I talk about in the show. It was called How to Act in a Disco. And, at a very young age, I was very determined to make it as a writer in New York. So I started, I was published pretty much immediately, when I was 19 and I continued on from there. And I worked, wrote for freelance for a lot of women's magazines. And I was writing about relationships, dating, women I knew, all of this change of relationships in the 1980s, which was when women entered the workforce en masse.
Wow.
And so that really changed the relationships between men and women because women were suddenly in the offices and there were all kinds of rules that, there had never been so many single women. You were supposed to go to college and then get married. And women weren't doing that anymore. They were coming to big cities like New York and Chicago, looking for careers, looking to do it all, looking to meet a better guy than they could meet back home, and also looking to have a career. It was the era of you were supposed to have it all.
Right. I actually,
And that was
now knowing,
1980s, not now. So,
right.
a lot of young people think like, oh, all this stuff is new. No, it's been going on at least since the 80s. So I was writing basically Sex and the City, but it was for women's magazines. And then I started working for the New York Observer, and the editor asked me if I wanted to have my own column. And I said yes, because I already knew exactly what it should be, because I'd already been doing it for 15 years, writing for women's magazines. The difference between what I was doing for women's magazines and the column in the New York Observer was that a lot of men read the New York Observer. So it was considered more important than women's magazines.
Interesting. All of that historical context gives me just a completely new outlook on the show and everything. I don't think I grasped that fact that women were coming into the workforce in the 1980s and it completely changed the dynamic.
Yes. And there were all kinds of situations like, there was the commitment crisis. And I think it was in 1987, Time magazine had a cover that said, if you are a woman and you get to be 30 years old and you're not married, your chances of getting married are the equivalent of being killed in a terrorist attack. So
unreal.
So that was at the end of the 1980s. And, it was really the beginning of, all of the dating issues that people have now.
Wow. That's incredible. I'm so happy that you shared that. Well, beyond Sex and the City, you've written best-selling novels like Four Blondes, Trading Up, Lipstick Jungle, One Fifth Avenue, and the Carrie Diaries. Looking back, which of those projects challenged you the most creatively and why?
Well, I would say that Trading Up was the first real novel that I wrote. And, it's challenging. Just, writing a novel is really hard. It's probably the hardest thing that anybody can do, because, you got to do everything yourself, all the characters, the plot. So that was really the first novel that I'd written. And that was what I wanted to do my whole life.
Wow. Well, yeah, it's what an accomplishment. Well, your one-woman show, True Tales of Sex, Success, and Sex and the City, feels like such a full circle moment. What made now the right time to tell your story in this live, personal way?
I guess it was like so many other things, and it started during the pandemic. Mm-hmm. And I met somebody who said, I think you can have your own one-woman show. It was certainly not anything that I'd ever thought about doing. And I just thought, I'll give it a try. I'll write something. And then lots of people were interested, and it ended up being off Broadway, which was pretty incredible.
Yeah.
Because that was something that, writing and starring in my own one-woman show was not something that was on my bingo card, they say. So it was just something that happened, and I've just continued to do it. I just got back from a trip in Europe where I was in probably 9 cities, but I did 6 performances.
Oh, man.
So including in Paris. So that was fun and interesting. So, Paris, Antwerp, Copenhagen, Amsterdam, and Bucharest.
Oh, wow.
Which was interesting.
Yeah, oh my gosh, what an incredible trip. And you'll be bringing the show to South Coast Repertory on May 30th and 31st. So what can Orange County audiences expect from this experience that feels different from reading your books or watching your shows?
Well, they get to see me in action.
Yeah.
And, it's the origin story of Sex and the City combined with my life story. And it's something that people seem to find it very inspirational. And it's a great girls' night out.
Oh, fun. I love that.
It's really fun. On the stage are a lot of my own shoes. But it really is like a one woman play, as opposed to, it's not just me standing up there and talking. Mm-hmm. It's, there's visuals, there's a game, real or not real, because there's so many things that happened in the TV show that happened in my real life, but they're better or worse. And it's a great, fun show. And, again, a great girls' night out. People dress up, they put on their fancy shoes and they grab their girlfriends and come and have a Cosmo. And it's really fun.
Oh my gosh. It sounds like an incredible night. Well, we are coming to the end of our time, but before I let you go, I have 3 final questions for you that we call the Thoughtful 3. So first, after decades of writing about ambition, love, reinvention, and success, what advice would you give today to the young woman who first arrived in New York at just 19 years old?
Well, I get asked this question pretty much in every interview. And in every interview, my answer is the same. And it is, get the money. Go for the money, go for the career. Back then it was still like having a career was still kind of fraught and overwrought, and you really weren't supposed to be terribly ambitious as a woman. Back in the 80s, you were still really supposed to be trying to get a man while trying to have a career. And I guess I wish I'd been more confident about the career part and didn't worry about, the man part. But there was a lot of, effort of trying to get married in the 80s. So that was, women were still, they were still pursuing that.
Right.
Not necessarily successfully, but then in the 90s, all of those single women who hadn't ended up marrying somebody in their 20s, were single and starting to make money and had their own lives. So those women were really the basis for Sex and the City.
Oh, well, what advice would you give to aspiring authors?
You just have to keep going. Mm-hmm. Just keep trying. I mean, it's something that it has to come from within, because it's, in general, for most people, it's not a money-making pursuit.
Right.
It's at best, it's kind of an upper middle class life.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's a real labor of love.
Those are things to consider. And definitely. you have to really want, it has to be your number one pursuit. If it's not your number one pursuit, then do something else, get married, raise kids. Don't make all of the sacrifices that you need to make to be a writer unless you feel like you would die if you didn't do it. And that was how I felt.
Got it. Well, lastly, what moments in your career have had the biggest impact on who you are today?
None. I am who I am. I've always kind of been the same person. And So I would say I've had my personalities had more of an impact on my career than the other way around.
Interesting. I love that. Well, thank you so much for doing this. I really, really appreciate your time.
Oh, Chelsea, thank you.